Welcome to the Nurturing Fathers Podcast, a show dedicated to helping men succeed at the most challenging and rewarding job they'll ever have, being a dad. Your hosts are Mark Perlman, the creator and founder of the Nurturing Fathers program, and his son, Corey Perlman, who facilitates the program at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary and is also a father of 2 young children. It's time to add tools to your Nurturing Fathers toolbox. Mark and Corey, take it away.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Nurturing Fathers program. My name is Corey Perlman, and I'm here with my fantastic father, Mark Perlman. What's up, man?
I'm doing great, Corey. I am here with some of my favorite people in the fathering world, Corey Perlman and John O'Neill from the great state of Massachusetts, Boston area. And John, just say hello.
Hello, everybody. My name is John O'Neill. I'm director of the Nurturing Fathers program at the Family Nurturing Center of Massachusetts.
Now, as we do with many of our guests on these podcasts, I would like John to fill in a little bit about where he started, who his family is, and how he got to this position of being a director of Nurturing Fathers program. Now, John is a rock star in many ways of the fatherhood field. He has done so much. He's got such a passion and sense of purpose about this work. So what is the arc of your involvement, John?
You know, you ever seen the movie The Jerk with Steve Martin?
Yes, I love that movie.
Okay, well, I was born a poor black child. Joke. I was born in Boston. And, you know, something I said today, I was giving a presentation out in Springfield at the DCF office. I told those folks that there's something within us, those of us who do this work, that draw us to this work. And for each of us, it might be a little different, but something drives us to this work. We have this need to help others. So you know John Badalament.
Yes.
Of course. So some time ago at the New England Fathering Conference, about 8-9 years ago, he did a story on me, he did a video on me and another guy from New Hampshire, or Portland, Maine, naturally, who were doing fathers programs. And he showed the video at the conference. And I'm watching myself on film, which to me is ghastly. But I heard myself say something that I didn't realize in the moment that I'd said that. And his question to me was, John, why do you do this work? And I saw myself and heard myself saying, I think I do this work because I'm trying to help men have the kind of family that I wanted when I was growing up and I couldn't have or didn't have. My father himself was not a very good father, although he was in my life every day of my life. He was an alcoholic. He was an abusive father. You know, so I grew up with a lot of pain and, you know, a lot of anguish and, you know, having to deal with that in my household, you know, the trauma that kind of, you know, can cause, you know, to a child. And so as I began, you know, I matured and went through, you know, many years in the street myself. My mom died when I was 12, so I had a lot of freedom to do whatever I wanted when I was young. And I always promised myself, you know, even through those dark early years when I was young, that when I did have children, I was going to be a better father to my children than my father was to me. And that was an oath that I made to myself. So as I began to have children, sure enough, I met a beautiful young lady. We got married. We had 2 kids. And we raised them. And, you know, in doing that, somehow I was drawn to working with people.
You introduced yourself as an African-American father, and I know you work with a lot of African-American men and
I do indeed.
Can you help us share an understanding of what the need is there and what place you see Nurturing Fathers fitting in?
Well, you know, one thing about the Nurturing Fathers curriculum, Mark, and you wrote it so you know, it's applicable, right, to any ethnicity, if you will, right? You know, we live in a very diverse country, man. So in my groups, you know, I have African Americans, I have Cape Verdeans, Puerto Ricans, I have white, I have, you know, Caribbean people, you know, Asians, I mean, you know, the whole gamut. And for particularly African American men, without getting too lengthy, I was down at your place a few years ago, and we talked about the history of African American fathers and the role of African American fathers. And so in a very real sense, the African American community is still dealing with the legacy of slavery. I'll give a timeline. So from 1619, when the first Black folks landed at Jamestown, Virginia, to around 1857, we were enslaved. And so as Black families, Black fathers, we weren't able to enjoy the benefits of America, you know, freedom, education, housing, health, all those things were denied to us. And we had no control over our families. You know, your wife, your daughter, your son could be sold into slavery at any moment. You know, and so our families were very fragile in that respect. So from 1857 to about 1964 or so, we were in Jim Crow. And still, the law of the land then was separate but equal. It was never equal, but it was separate. So again, we weren't allowed to enjoy the benefits of America. It's only been since 1964, when I was 17 years old, and that President Johnson signed his Civil Rights Bill, that Black folks in America and the U.S. have had a chance, to be able to go out into society and enjoy certain of the benefits, education, health, and what have you. So imagine this now, over a period of 400 years, Blacks have only had the freedom of access in the U.S. For about 60, somewhere around there, 65. So let's look at like it's maybe a foot race, okay? So when the race began, a certain group of people were allowed to start the race and to start running. Another group was held back at the starting line. When the first group got halfway through the race, the second group was able then to start their race. So if we go at the same pace, then Black folks would never catch up. You know what I mean, right? Yeah. For instance, there's a film called The Black Fatherhood Project by a young man named Jordan Theory from LA. And one of the things that he's done, he was able to go back and trace his lineage through his fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers for 6 generations. And he began his documentary to talk about his own family. But then as he began doing the research, he broadened it to talk about, African-American fathers, in their totality. And one of the things he talks about in the film, he goes back to Africa and talks about, the role of fathers pre-Christian era, before the advent of the Europeans into Africa, what the role of father was. And one thing he discovered was that the African tribe was a village. The village was the family. Hence the phrase we use today, it takes a village. Well, in African culture, that was real. The whole village raised a child. So when we came to America, we were kind of forced to adopt the European family style, which is mom, dad, and the kids. That family unit, which was far into the African culture and African history. And so, we're trying to fit, in some cases, a round peg into a square hole. And Black folks are still trying to adapt to this nuclear family kind of idea, which is not natural to us. To add to that, for instance, one of the ways that the people in America gain wealth is through real estate. You buy a home, it appreciates in value, you pay it off, your mortgage, and then you sell it, you make a lot of money. You buy another home, and you grow like that. So during World War II, when the soldiers came home from World War II, the Black soldiers and the white soldiers alike, who had fought in that war, sacrificed their lives in that war, when they came home, the white soldiers were given the GI Bill. They were given loans to buy homes. They were given loans to go to school and get an education. That was denied to the Black soldiers. And so when the white soldiers then became upwardly mobile in society because they had these benefits, the Black soldiers could not benefit from that. And not only that, segregation kept them in these, what we call now ghettos. When I was a child, they were called slums. So the one thing that we haven't done in this country, is to have an honest, open dialogue about race and the effects of race and the ramifications of race and racism on communities of color.
Right.
So if I, as a Black man, and I have a good credit rating, right, I have a good job, if I go into a bank to seek a loan, right, one, I'm going to get a higher percentage rate than a white counterpart. That's a fact. We've done many studies on that. If I get the loan at all, you understand? So there are certain benefits, that white folks get. And we talk about white privilege in this country, and there are folks who don't believe that's true, because there are some white folks, man, that came from Italy, came from Ireland, came from, my God, man, from the concentration camps in Nazi Germany, have come to this country and worked hard and were able to become upwardly mobile. You understand? And work themselves, and, they had good jobs, be able to buy a nice home in a nice suburb. And so I don't begrudge any of those people, right? But again, being classed as white in this country gives you that privilege to be able to enjoy those benefits, So for me as a Black man, and I'm a dark-skinned Black man, as you know, I can't pass. I can't come here and change my name or change my accent and, and assimilate into society. With my dark skin, they see me coming a mile away. So that's the difference between those immigrants that have come here and been able to become upwardly mobile and Black folks. So Black fathers deal with that on a daily basis. I don't know if you've ever been stopped, and told you were speeding when you weren't. I don't know if you've ever been stopped by a cop and just berated, and disrespected. That happens to us on a regular basis. You begin to internalize those things. And I talked about this today, and I talk about this a lot. And this is not just Black fathers I'm talking about now, to be honest. It's unemployed fathers, it's working class fathers. So if a family is destitute, and needs assistance, the policy in this state and in this country has been for decades and decades, Mark, if there's a father in the household, then that family is not eligible for services.
Right.
Now, that just does not affect Black fathers. It affects, all fathers of all ethnicities who are unemployed or, of low-paying jobs and no-paying jobs. But we have policies in this country that serve to break up families, and that destroys the community.
Right.
And one thing that I always say, and it sounds trite, but I said it today to 50 DCF workers, I say it every time I give a presentation. I tell them that the work they do, in a very real sense, although they may not realize it, is nation building. Because in order to have a strong nation, you have to first have strong communities within that nation. And in order to have strong communities, you have to have strong families in those communities. And in order to have strong families, you have to have a strong father in that family. Now, he doesn't necessarily have to live in the household, because we know in this country, 54 or so % of all marriages end in divorce within the first 7 years. And that maybe 7 out of 10 children living in this country at some point will live in a single parent home. We know that. But our policies serve to break families up and tear apart communities. So what we should do, right, rather than break families up and deny services to families if there's a father there, provide services to keep that father there.
Right.
We wouldn't have as many people in jail,
right,
in prison, right? You know and I know well that the dangers and the dire circumstances that happen to children to grow up in a household without a responsible, loving father. We have, mounds and mounds and decades of research that tell us this here. Yet our policies have not caught up with the research yet. So that's kind of the work that I do and that you do as well, Mark.
right.
So part of what I do is I help to transform men's lives, and this program works, right? It's evidence-based. 8 out of 10 guys that come to our programs completed. That's an amazing retention rate. And so I know that we improve the quality of people's lives. But if I improve this father's, parenting, if I can improve his fathering, and yet there are no services for him, it's like being all dressed up with no place to go. You know what I mean? So part of my work is not only, to help men transform their lives and to become more responsible and nurturing fathers, but also to change systems, to make those systems more engaging of fathers, and more inclusive of fathers on their caseload, and more prone to provide services to those fathers to strengthen them. So that's the work that I do, Mark, or try to do anyway.
And I would like to express my heartfelt and deep appreciation, John, for your work as you just described it. Very deep and very real. What a context you created for the importance of it. And I asked the question about African-American fathers, and you really did walk us down that path and gave us a very important, you talk about the dialogue about the reality of racism in our country. Well, what you just described and what part of this conversation has engaged, and I'm happy to say, is at least the beginning of that kind of dialogue and that kind of understanding. The work you do is inspirational. The work you do is healing. The work you do are stories of redemption. And the many levels that we're talking about, from the individual to the ethnic class to the DCF group and on, you're impacting on all of those. I appreciate what you do in the Family Nurturing Center of Massachusetts is a wonderful example of an organization that supports that. And that's why, going back to where we started this dialogue, I really feel that your model should be researched and spread to the rest of the country as much as possible, because it works. The results and the evidence are there to prove it. So thank you, my friend. Thank you for the inspirational words.
Well, just quickly, let me end this way. You wrote this curriculum, Mark, right? And Sharif, on the way back from Springfield today, asked me this question: what made him write that? So I couldn't answer that question, but I said, you know what? He saw a need, right? So I came onto this and this Nurturing Fathers curriculum and Nurturing Fathers idea in 2006. I was already 57 years old at the time. And in that period, it's been, I think, almost 15 years now, it's transformed my life in profound and fundamental ways. It's transformed, and as I said, I was older, man, coming to this, right? Yet it still has transformed my life. So I thank you. I thank you sincerely. I tell people I'm going to do this thing, to have to carry me out of here in a body bag.
Yeah. Same with me. Carry me off stage, man.
We try to end the podcast with every guest with just some words of wisdom and advice for other fathers listening in. And feel free to, if anybody else wants to chime in that's with you there. But for people who have listened to this podcast and are going to go back to their journey as men and as fathers, what advice from over the years and everything that you've experienced would you give dads listening in?
Well, one of the things we do a 3-day training. And in the very first day, we walk the participants through an exercise. It's called the nurturing and abusive world. And we create 2 worlds, one nurturing and one abusive. And then we ask people, to go and stand on a continuum, right, where you think you began in this world, either in the nurturing world or the non-nurturing abusive world. And so each person, will go to that spot where they believe that they began life at. And then I'll tell them, okay, so now I want you to go and stand on this continuum where you think you are now in life. And then they'll go and stand in that spot. And once they've done that, then I ask everybody, now look around. What do you see, right? And so what they say to a person is, wow, everybody moved, right? And I said, that's the key. And working with people, if you can even, help them to realize that they have the power to change their life, even incrementally, if you can show them that they can move even a little bit, that gives them hope that they can move more. Because many of the people that we work with kind of believe that they're stuck where they're at. I'm black and I'm poor, I'm white and I'm poor, I can't change my life, life sucks. But we convince people, right, that you can change. So I say to those out there, no matter what your situation, no matter how dark or dire you might think it is, you have the power within you to transform your life. You have the power within you to live the life you choose, to dream a life, make it come to reality. And that's real. I've done it in my life. That's what I teach the guys I work with, and I've seen men transform their lives, right? Believe in yourself and never, ever give up on yourself.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Mark. Love you guys. Take care. Talk to you soon.
We do too, buddy. Thank you. All right, everybody. That was another episode of the Nurturing Fathers program. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a comment or a rating. And also take a picture of this episode and share it on your social media. Tag Nurturing Fathers. We certainly would appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next one. Make it a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Nurturing Fathers podcast. Have questions or comments? Join the conversation at facebook.com/nurturingfathers or email us at nurturingfathers@gmail.com.